The current king of Georgia, ruling now as Georgi Bagrationi, third of his name, was not the first intended to sit the throne of Georgia. Nearly 40 years prior, his father before him, Dmitri Bagrationi, first of his name, broke all known Georgian precedent to support Georgi as heir apparent after quarreling for some time with his firstborn son David. The reason for such a quarrel is unknown to us. Bards and lowborn alike still relish in sordid tales of David's personal failings as cause for his disinheritance, but we may perhaps never know the truth of it. Now, after 20 years of rule, Georgi III stands to break the Georgian custom once more. Having produced no male heirs with his queen consort Borodukan, and having crushed a coup to enthrone his nephew, the son of his older brother, the would-be king, Georgi III has made it clear that he intends for his eldest daughter Tamar to succeed him. The young Princess Tamar will be the first woman to rule Georgia in nearly 200 years of Bagrationi rule, and though she is charming and hardworking, the nobility bristles at the prospect. Will she be able to rise to the occasion and achieve the greatness she is destined for? Hello everyone, and welcome to the story of Tamar Bagrationi. The ultimate goal of this playthrough is to get the Tamar Mepe achievement, that is, as Princess Tamar, rule all of Georgia and fully conquer Armenia and Dalam. Tamar is a fascinating historical character that achieved a great deal in her own lifetime, so I'm hoping to do her proud here. Little remains on record of Tamar's time as heir presumptive. A year after she was officially proclaimed as the next ruler of Georgia, however, correspondence between the acting steward for King Georgi, Duke Kakaber of Abkhazia, and the young princess indicate a growing friendship, or perhaps mentorship, between the two rulers. Those same letters would prove fateful, as in their discussions of trade and the economics of the realm, Duke Kakaber directed Princess Tamar's attention towards the Grand Principality of Kiev. Currently ruled by the Sviatoslavich dynasty, the principality was well renowned for its people's martial prowess and the important trade ties that tied them to their Orthodox brethren to the south. Following some diplomatic overtures, Princess Tamar and her council arranged for the Grand Prince to send his son, Gleb, to be Tamar's count consort and future king consort. The gifts showered upon the newlyweds were rich indeed, and after covering the necessary expenses of the ceremony, the princess directed the surplus to funding an elite regiment of Manaspa, a wall of armored cavalry with seasoned veterans for riders. The marriage between Gleb and Tamar soon proved fruitful, and the princess was with child within the year. There was little time for celebration, however, as her father King Georgi III marched his armies to war, aiming to oust the Mathuridi from the disputed lands to the south of the kingdom. In 1181, Tamar gave birth to her first child, a healthy girl. Tamar honored her mother, naming the little princess Borodukan. Perhaps to prepare his daughter for rule, perhaps to allow his wife to live alongside the newborn child, King Georgi III named Tamar to his council as steward soon after the birth of his grandchild. In any event, the time for celebration was once again waylaid by the declaration of war by Atabeg Muhammad IV, who marched from Azerbaijan in the lands of Dalam. The incursion split the front drastically, diverting efforts from the offense in Armenia towards the defense of the eastern lands from the invaders. Tamar raised her soldiers in defense of the realm, marching alongside them as they fought in the Battle of Ganzasar, but her efforts were cut down by the Atabeg's forces. She escaped unscathed, but her army and her council was decimated by the battle. It was a lesson she would take with her throughout her entire life. Tamar would never again charge so recklessly into battle. To the south, King Georgi III was faring no better. In the hopes of taking advantage of the Atabeg's movements within Georgia, he moved a host to Dalamite lands to take ground with the enemy distracted. But time would not be on the king's side. They were unable to break through in the siege at Urmia, and unable to escape before the Atabeg's relief forces arrived to rout them. Nearly half of the king's army was killed in the rout, and the king himself sustained a grievous wound in the battle, losing his eye. Worse yet, a strategos from the Byzantine Empire had taken advantage of the chaos to invade, laying claim to one of the kingdom's counties along the Black Sea. As the king regrouped and marched away once more, he delegated further responsibilities to Princess Tamar, who was charged with securing temporary arrangements with a southern Atabeg occupying lands in Armenia. The princess even briefly served as princess regent when a turn of misfortune saw the king captured in battle, forcing him to surrender within the week. On his return, Princess Tamar stepped aside, resuming her responsibilities as steward and providing her soldiers to the king as the realm desperately resisted a third defeat. The Georgians would have no such luck. Within 3 years, their strength had been tested 3 times, and thrice had their strength failed to repel the invaders. Defeated and maimed, King Georgi III died on the 15th of July, 1184. So rose Queen Tamar Bagrationi, first of her name, as Queen of all Georgians. In her first days as reigning queen in her own right, Tamar appointed her first nobles' council. She appointed her sister, the Princess Rusudan Bagrationi, as chancellor. She arrived to court alongside her husband, Duke Sargis Zakarian, as steward. From the shores of the Black Sea arrived Duke Dagato II Kakabarazid of Abkhazia and Duke Batso Jakeli of Tau Glargeti to serve as the realm's marshal and spymaster respectively. It is of note that the Armenian steward and spymaster styled themselves princes, according to the Armenian custom. As such, Queen Tamar's council became known to most as the Prince's Council. The first acts of the council were to arrange the burial and funerary procession for the late king. It was an extravagant affair by all accounts, with no expense spared by the crown to honor Tamar's father. Contemporary accounts describe Queen Tamar as nothing less than the model monarch in her mourning, paying for expensive wines to be emptied as a symbolic gesture as she performed a grand speech that promised a reign that would honor King Georgi III's memory. Her patriarch Orbeli's written collections focus on her humble prayers to the Lord above and her strength in the face of her father's absence. Ever a compassionate man, King Consort Gleb himself was deeply affected by the grief, despite having shortly known his father-in-law. King Gleb and Queen Tamar were described as much more intimate following the funeral, if not passionate for one another. The realm was afforded little rest, as the Prince's Council sought vengeance against the Turks to the south. Distracted by a war of his own, the Atabeg Muhammad was declared an illegal occupant of the county of Anand, and so the brave armies of Georgia marched to Armenia to return its lands to the crown. Ever willing to serve his wife, King Gleb mustered their forces in the keep of Prince Sargis, and moved to take control of the county. But the harshness of winter had not yet broken, and accustomed though the Russians were to bitter snows, no man is impervious. Not 1 month after the declaration of war, messengers rode out from the host to deliver the tragic news. King Gleb, worn down by the conditions of the craggy southern mountains, had frozen to death before the siege had even begun. Queen Tamar is reported as having received the report in unflinching silence, before retiring to her chambers, unseen for the better part of a week. She was absent from the next Prince's Council, only communicating by writing to charge Marshal Dagato II with command over the siege. Happier tidings arrived soon after, as Queen Tamar's unseen diplomatic efforts took root. The Duke Sazlan, patriarch of the Alan branch of the Bagrationi dynasty north of the Caucasus Mountains, agreed to bring his men across the mountains to support the war effort. Supplications to the ecumenical patriarch in Constantinople paid dividends as well, allowing Queen Tamar to fund a wartime expansion of her Manaspa regiments. These communications reveal some insight as to the chaos in the west, where the Byzantine Empire was embroiled in increasing tensions with faithless crusaders, who soon abandoned the holy war for Jerusalem to instead support a claimant puppeteered by the Catholic Hungarians and a young, conniving Venetian doge. The zealous queen might have indeed made common cause with the Greeks to repel the invaders, though her dutiful counselors redirected her attention to the holy war currently being waged in their own realm. Indeed, some say this withholding of support was soon proven prudent, as the Strategos Andronikos II returned once more, greedy for more territory in Abkhazia. In his messages to the Prince's Council from the siege, Marshal Dagato II raged at the gall of the Greeks as he requested leave to cut them down and relieve his own lands. Queen Tamar responded as calmly as ever. In due time they would have their revenge on the Strategos, but her father's reign had buckled under a multi-front war, and she had learned her lessons well. As the situation stood, her armies were to focus on one threat at a time. To divide their reduced numbers was to invite defeat. Fate is cruel, however, and despite her best efforts, Queen Tamar's people had grown tired of the war and chafed under the wartime taxes that they paid. Though Tamar's sister suggested that they treat with the small folks' demands, the Dukes Batso and Sargis declared them traitors all, and Queen Tamar, frustrated by her army's difficulty in taking Kars, was inclined to agree. And so a third front opened, as Tbilisi was beset by violence throughout its villages and burgs. The castle itself was soon under a siege led by Ishkanik of Tbilisi, of whom little is known. What seems most likely is that Ishkanik was a veteran of King Georgi III's wars and settled in the county after their defeats. Within a fortnight, riders from Kars were sent to herald the army's success in taking the fortress. When the delivery of that news was prevented by the uprising besieging Tbilisi, the brave scouts redoubled their ride to rejoin Marshal Dagato II and inform him of the situation. Confronted with 3 seizures, one threatening his own keep and family, the loyal commander brought his men to relieve the capital at once. As Dagato proved his loyalty above all else, Prince Sargis committed the disloyalty of taking advantage of the chaos in Georgia, demanding the crown free its lords to rule autonomously. Unwilling to lose her army's strength to desertion and unwilling to provoke yet more violence, Queen Tamar acquiesced. Marshal Dagato crashed into the hastily assembled uprising and broke them to a man, ending the rebellion in one fell swoop. Welcomed into the castle with honors and celebration, Dagato II asked for nothing save leave to take the army north to relieve his home and his duchess. Queen Tamar is said to have warmly agreed to his request with a kind but reserved smile. Other tellings have the queen remarking to the duke in private that she would sooner have him as a brother-in-law than the oaf. In any event, Duke Dagato II marched north to break the siege in Abkhazia. They would fight in the forests of Gudavka, and though outnumbered, the Greeks forgot that these had once been Dagato II's lands, and they had been his lands for longer. As the Greeks were routed, the duke wasted no time, marching his men south to face the Turks. The Atabeg's men had been at the siege for over a year, and had grown complacent. A host nearly twice the size of the Turks caught them all but unawares, and at Akamps, the Atabeg himself was captured, forced to ransom himself and agree to the terms of surrender. The Greek invaders were repelled in short order, and Queen Tamar's wars were won. With the coffers flush with reparations, the realm might have known peace for a time, had it not been for the reports from the east. A power vacuum in Shirvan was an opportunity the Queen Tamar refused to let slip, and so she asked her loyal marshal to march once more. Minor reforms came from Tamar as she declared a temporary reduction for taxes in celebration of the receipt of reparations, and to sate the grumbling of her vassals. Tbilisi was benefiting from the influx of gold as well, and court life was incrementally made more grandiose as Queen Tamar saw to new import routes for fashion and food, and ordered an expansion of the castle's apartments. More coin was sent at the behest of Marshal Dagato II to the retaken Vanand, and the county was granted with full rights to a local representative of the Armenian population. More privileges were granted to the Armenians, as Prince Batso promised extra taxation in exchange for the codification of the rights of his people to worship with the Armenian Church. Duke Dagato II moved west to oversee the transfer of Vanand, then took his forces further to defend the faith and his allies for a time. This left Prince Sargis in command of the forces in the east, and he proved competent and eager to fight the Shah. In short order, the war was won, and the lands and titles usurped under Queen Tamar's direct control. In just over 5 years of rule, Queen Tamar had gotten vengeance on the Turks by reclaiming Georgian lands, defended Georgian sovereignty on the Black Sea, and legitimized her rule in the eyes of small folk and nobility alike by crushing revolts and expanding the realm's reach to the Caspian Sea. The realm would know a short peace, though Queen Tamar had grander ambitions on the horizon, and Georgia could not rest for long as the tensions of the Caucasus continued to fester. Thanks for watching the first episode of Tamar Mepe. In the next, we will continue with Queen Tamar's reign and the wars yet to come. In the meantime, I've been Cran Polo, and you've been the viewer. Have a good one.